Hi, welcome to my channel again. So today I'm going to be doing a review on China Rich Girlfriend by Kevin Kwan, the book that takes place 2 years after the events of Crazy Rich Asians. I did an extensive review on Goodreads on Crazy Rich Asians and I gave that book 3 out of 5. This one I'm also giving 3 out of 5, although I was really tempted giving it just 2 out of 5 because at some point I just felt like reading China Rich Girlfriend was quite similar to pulling my teeth out. It was that bad. It was really bad at some points. But then Kevin Kwan kind of redeemed himself and the plot by like adding a whole bunch of stuff. And in the last quarter of the novel, things just started happening. And it was like a killer ending, but at the same time, it infuriated me how I had to like go through almost like 400 pages where absolutely nothing happens, and then in the last moment I have all these things like sort of piled in together and I'm just like, whoa, okay, this is not awesome. If you do want to read this novel, I think this novel is good for people who really loved Crazy Rich Asians. If you're like a fan of the series, if you really loved it, and I'm not like being sarcastic, if you loved it, you should probably read this one too. This one is better written, which is one of the good things it has going for it. It's definitely either better written or better edited, one of the two, both of them, which makes it a much more pleasant and fluid read than sort of Crazy Rich Asians, where a whole bunch of sentences and words sometimes felt like crumpled into this very little space on a page. So definitely better written, more interesting towards the ending, but before you get to the ending you have to go through a lot of BS that I'm not sure you would want to go through. So if you read Crazy Rich Asians and thought it was okay, probably don't pick this one up. If you loved Crazy Rich Asians, you're gonna probably love China Rich Girlfriend. So yet again, I made a list because lists are your friends in my awesome notebook that I upgraded. Try taking that to school with you and take notes and let your prof see it. Hashtag this is what happened to me. So I made a list of things that I want to talk about in while reviewing this novel. So the good things, let's start with the good, right? So the good, like I said, it is better written. It does read more fluently. It does read more naturally, because Crazy Rich Asians was a disaster for me. It was just like sentences that started midway and I was just like, what is going on? And so this novel definitely is better written. It also has like newspaper excerpts and like blog excerpts, so it sort of reads more interesting from like different people. It also has like email exchanges, so overall it's like a little bit more interesting and a little bit more like dynamic than the somewhat stifling writing of Crazy Rich Asians. Another good thing, and there's like quite a few good things about this novel, less new characters. So a sentiment that a lot of readers sort of like shared and complained about, quite honestly, was the abundance of characters that you were introduced to practically from the very start of Crazy Rich Asians. So I don't know that much about Asian culture, but I do know that, especially I guess Chinese families, they tend to be quite big. There's like a lot of relatives, there's a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins and nephews, and like it's very large families, and everyone is somehow related to like they're all related somehow to one another. It's pretty crazy. And so in this one, you sort of went through that awful stage in Crazy Rich Asians. So most characters in China Rich Girlfriend will just be recurring characters. So these are people that you already met beforehand. There's like very few new characters, and like even the characters from from Crazy Rich Asians, they're not gonna make as many appearances as they did before. They might be somehow mentioned, but honestly, the central characters in this novel are Rachel, Nick, Carlton, Colette, Kitty Pong. Like, honestly, it's not the sort of clan that you were introduced to in the first novel. It's like selected few characters. You will be sort of reading the novel from their vintage point, and luckily for us, the readers, especially for those of us who are not very good at remembering names, it's going to be like mostly, like I said, Rachel, Nick, Astrid, really few characters. So like I said, you went through that awful stage in the first novel. Kevin Kwan is not going to sort of put you through that one again in China Rich Girlfriend, which I really appreciate. Thank you, Kevin. Another good thing, so this novel is actually shorter. Not by far, but it's like, I think, like 20 pages shorter, which I really appreciate because this one is 477 pages long, and I mean, as you can see, the writing here is quite dense. This is not like, double spaced like a YA novel. It doesn't need to be that long. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to bring this novel down, but honestly, it could have easily been 100 pages shorter. Like, I'm sorry. Crazy Rich Asians had the very same problem. It didn't need to be that long, honestly. Like, why the hell would you write a 500 pages novel when it needs to be like 300 pages long? Like, honestly, this is so infuriating, and it happens so often, and I really hate it. So this one is a little bit shorter. So again, I feel like it's been edited better, so good job, editor, whoever it is. I feel like I have to thank the editor. Another thing is that this one is quite funny. It does have its funny moments. It's described as snarky and wicked funny. I think that's a little bit ambitious of Janet Maslin, the New York Times reviewer. It's not, it is snarky a little bit. It's not wicked funny. It doesn't make you roll on the floor like with laughter or like pee your pants or like have tears in your eyes. I've read funnier things in my life. With all that said, it is kind of funny, it is entertaining. It does have like moments when you just do sort of like, let a little laughter escape because it is like quite entertaining. It's not meant to be sort of, the immigration struggle assimilation story. It is not that at all. This is another point that I really like about the Crazy Rich Asians, that most Asian novels that I sort of heard of or read are, especially like if it's Chinese novelists, they usually tell the story of sort of immigration, assimilation, like racism, the American dream, all that stuff. And like in this novel, you don't have any of that. So these people are Chinese. They're very proud of their culture, they're very proud of their heritage, they don't really care to impress anyone, they don't want to assimilate, they don't want to like live up to some expectation, whatever. They have like a shit ton of money, they're happy with who they are, they're very protective of their heritage, and I really, really appreciate it. It's nice to read a story about minorities, although I'm not sure that you can technically call Asians minorities anymore. But it's really nice to hear this from the perspective of very successful people who don't feel the need to sort of adjust. I thought it was really great, and this is one thing that I really love about Crazy Rich Asian trilogy, that it sort of celebrates all this lavishness and this extravagance, and it celebrates ethnicity and heritage. And that I think was really well done. Of course, it has a lot to do with the fact that these people come from like the aristocratic background of China and Singapore, But other than that, it's really nice to read to read about this society and this ethnicity from a completely different vantage point. I really appreciated that. Another thing, some more things that I really liked, I'm following the list. It did address some serious issues, but I mean, if you're looking to pick up a novel about the crisis that China has to face in terms of ecological disasters and pollution and the widening gap between the social classes, this is definitely not this novel. If you read it, it feels like every single person in China is at least a millionaire, and they're not at all. This is not at all the case. There are a lot of very rich people in China, but it's sort of the way that it reads is that everyone in China is incredibly rich, and they're not. Sadly, this is not the case. But it does sort of address these issues, and it does sort of try and give you a bit of a different perspective on spending. And the main character Rachel sort of said, I cannot buy a couture dress that costs $100,000 while there's kids starving in all these developing world countries. And her friend says, well, if you're buying this super expensive couture dress, you're feeding the seamstress, and sort of you help her purchase an apartment in Prague or whatever. And I'm yeah, but these people are not exactly impoverished from the get-go, all these designers and whatever, they already are okay, they're doing okay, they're not exactly in dire straits, so I think it's a bad comparison, but I do sort of understand where you're coming from. So issues poverty and pollution were not really addressed in Crazy Rich Asians, but it was nice to sort of see it addressed here, especially in light of what's going on in China right now. So, and sort of how much power and wealth China has, and people are sort of looking up to China and sort of it feels like putting pressure on Chinese people who have money, and they sort of are trying to ask them, well, are you gonna do something with this money other than buy Lamborghinis and Mercedes cars? And the answer is, I don't know. I have no idea what's gonna happen. Because China is this emerging global power, and people don't really, I think, know how to sort of digest it, and they don't really know how to, because we're used to I guess the West being the leading financial force in the world, but now there's a huge shift, and no one really knows how to take that, so I guess we'll see. And China Rich Girlfriend obviously doesn't have the answer. This is not an economics book, but it does sort of address it in a way a little bit, because I think that even Rachel, who is an economist, says it can last forever because this is it's way too crazy. But then she says, but then I see that all these high-rise buildings spring up like mushrooms after rain, and I honestly don't know how to sort of treat that. I don't know how to see it, and I don't know how to explain it. So another awesome thing, I have to stop saying another. Michael and Astrid, Carlton and Colette. So you sort of definitely see the dynamics and the power struggles in relationships, and you definitely see how money is a big issue. Another thing that Kevin Kwan did in this novel, and I really liked it, that he sort of said, hey, being a multimillionaire at the age of 21 is super duper awesome. And you can do super duper awesome things with your money. And you can travel the world, and you can buy all the dresses. For women, it's dresses. For men, it's sports cars. But at the end of the day, money, some problems money cannot fix. And no matter how much money you have. Some of the characters, like Carlton, he makes an awful mistake. And better say he does something that ends horribly for him, and for the people involved. And it's like a huge thing that had awful consequences, and this is something that he'll have to live with for the rest of his life. Like, money can cover it up, money can give you a new face after you get a like plastic surgery from the top surgeons, but you know, you cannot really like invent a time machine, and you can't take your actions back. So this is what Kevin Kwan sort of said, that these people are human, and these people live with the mistakes they made. And these people have ruined lives, and they are aware of it, and they feel awful about it, but there's nothing they can do. And they will have to live with this guilt and this burden until, you know, till the day they die. So it does say that money is not the solution for everything. And, like, money cannot buy you happiness. Like, as cliche as it sounds, and money can definitely not buy you love. As for Michael and Astrid, what I really sort of hated about this, and I loved at the same time, is that their relationship sort of started going downhill. I sort of didn't understand, like, how, you know, this guy, who I thought had so much integrity and was so real, changed. Like, he did a 180-degree change once he started having money. He became this maniacal billionaire. He became like a complete psycho. And Astrid, who I like, she's not my favorite character, but she's pretty likable, just sort of put with his shit until the moment where he he threatened to kill her, and like, or slash publish this tell-all article in like some gossip magazine in like Singapore. And I was like, oh my god, Michael, I loved you so much, like, what the hell happened to you? You seemed like such a promising guy, and like, you're a dick, honestly. So like, I think it does say that money does sort of change people, and quite often not for the best. So in speaking of money, it also addresses sort of new money versus old money, tradition versus like the new generation of Chinese people emerging. Because like, if you read Crazy Rich Asians, there's definitely this idea that there's like the elite, and it like the aristocratic class of Singapore, and it doesn't really matter how much money you have, but if they can trace your lineage to the days of Jesus Christ, you're golden, you're good to go. But if you're some nouveau riche billionaire that made his fortune in like the 90s, people are gonna really look down on you in Singapore, because they're gonna be like, you're nothing but like a mainlander. And I'm like, okay, I don't really know what that means, but I mean, whatever. And you can definitely see this snobbery emerging. In mainland China, people seem to care less what your background is, because so many people came from these small towns or villages, and they made a lot of money, and you know, everyone comes from like a shithole, as they say. But in like Singapore, like, people have been accumulating wealth for like centuries and decades, and like, they come from all these like, you know, clans, and they can trace their families back to like the Ming dynasty or something. And in China, it's very different. It's not like that at all. So Hong Kong is sort of titters in between the two of them. It's like you have the elite, because it does share like similar history with like Singapore, maybe because it's like used to be a British colony, so some of the values have been embedded there as well. But China is definitely not like that. I mean, there's definitely the aristocracy, but people don't care as much. Like, who is your dad? Like, does he come from like this clan, or does your mom come from this clan? Like, no one really cares. At least that's the impression that I got. And you definitely see the clash between the new generation that has all this money and all these resources, and they live life how they want, and they definitely have, I think, Western values compared to their parents. They think about what makes them happy, and individuality, and placing their happiness first. And their parents are like, especially if you're a girl, it's awful. They're like, you have to have kids, you have to give birth to sons. This is your only role in life. You have to be a good wife, and you have to be a mother. And the guys have to just basically tell them what they're like. If their parents tell them you have to go into politics or you have to be a doctor, They have to just say, okay, I'm gonna be a doctor because this is what my parents want me to be. And I mean, you can definitely see that this generation of Asians is definitely not happy with that. They definitely don't want to like just blindly follow their parents. They want to live their lives. So it was nice to sort of see that clash occur, and sort of the young generation sort of learning how to speak for themselves, and sort of, you know, standing up to their parents and saying, hey, I don't really care about politics. I'm only 23. Let me sort of explore what it is that I want to do with my life. So that's like, I think that's a very sort of Western way of thinking. And it's interesting to see how, like, in very traditional countries, like all these Asian countries, how you can definitely see that this way of thinking is sort of becoming contagious. And you can definitely read that a lot of the Asian parents are not happy about this. They sort of see the West as a very negative influence, which is kind of funny because they still end up sending their parents to all the top schools in Europe and North America. So they still want their kids to have that education and to be exposed to like the Western lifestyle, but they want their kids to sort of have that Asian mentality, which I think is sort of like impossible, because you can't send a young, impressionable person into the West where there's like freedom, and then like, you know, and then you expect them to have the same mindset that, you know, their parents had like 40 years ago. That's a little crazy. So now let's go to the bad, and I'm gonna go through this like super fast because like this review has been super long, and this is my problem. This is like mea culpa. I do apologize. So sometimes it reads like a fashion blog, and it's awful. I don't care. Like, why do I have to read pages of pages of pages on descriptions of dresses? Like, I understand that Kevin Kwan probably really loves high-end fashion. He probably really knows a lot of really awesome designers, but I don't give a shit about all these designers and like all these brands that I've never heard of, and like they cost like $10,000 like per button. And I honestly don't care. Why should I care? Like, I get that these people can spend a ton of money on a dress. Why do you have to read like every single chapter, these like lengthy passages? Like, it contributes zero to the plot other than emphasizing just how rich these people are. I really detested these passages, and I would like to give myself a medal for actually making through them. And another thing that I really hated about this book was the fact that nothing was happening for 2/3 of the novel. Can you imagine picking up a novel that's almost 500 pages long and have nothing happen for like 3/4? Nothing happens. Isn't that like excruciating? Isn't that the most awful thing? And it's not like even that interesting that you can sort of say, oh, at least like the characters are awesome. Like, Kevin, why did you do this? Like, honestly, why? Like, all of a sudden, in the last part of the book, a whole bunch of things are happening. Like, Rachel is, like, poisoned. Like, there's, like, this revelation. There's, like, this showdown. There's, like, raw, like, a shit ton of things. And you're like, okay, this is awesome. I'm loving this. But why did I have to, like, go through 400 pages before something actually started happening? This is, like, awful. Another thing that I honestly disliked is the fact that it's Nick and Rachel who are the main characters. Like, honestly, I just, like, Rachel grew on me eventually, because obviously if she's being mentioned that often, she will eventually grow on you. She's a nice person, so is Nick. They're very nice people. They're very well mannered, they're educated, they are like, you know, they traveled. Honestly, I think that if I met them in real life, I probably would have liked them. But making them the central characters of a novel just feels... Sorry about that. Sorry. But making them the central characters of a novel, in my opinion, is like totally uncalled for. It's like so boring. It's like, why? Like, Rachel is probably one of the most boring literary characters I've ever met. She's so grounded. She's so well-mannered. She almost never gets mad. She always is very composed, very put together. It's really, like, I think Nick is, like, the emotional one, if you can call, like, this history professor emotional. Like, they are, I'm sorry, they are just boring. Like, for a trilogy, for them to be the central characters, I just think it's totally unnecessary, in my opinion. I just feel like there's no need for that whatsoever. They are awesome people on their own, but not as, not as the leading characters of this novel that sort of like reads like a comedy of manners. It just reads like a mashup of Pygmalion. It reads like, The Great Gatsby, like any Austen novel, some Bronte novels. It's a mashup of a lot of classics, and you can tell that Kevin Kwan is a super educated, really, really well-read guy. And this is another thing that he sort of stresses in his novel, that you can basically fake your way into like high society. All you need is to make the right moves. But I'm like getting sidetracked. So Nick and Rachel are not very interesting. Quite honestly, they're not interesting at all as characters. They are like, I wish them all the best, but they are just boring to be like the main characters. And the last thing I'm gonna say, honestly, is the best part about this novel probably was Kitty Pong. I just love saying her name, like Kitty Pong. Kitty Pong is freaking amazing. We don't really know. She comes from some small town in China, I don't know, but she makes this transition from a porn star to a soap opera starlet in Hong Kong to the wife of Bernard Tai, the playboy billionaire who turns into some Buddhist monk thing / Brad Pitt during the separation from Angelina Jolie, where all he does is drink matcha and he does yoga, and like it's crazy. Like, you have to read it. But Kitty Pong is so amazing. Like, she's so self-aware, and she's like such a nice person, surprisingly, right? And she made this awesome transition. Like, unlike Michael, who I really detested because he suddenly had all this money and I really hated what he became, Kitty Pong, on the other hand, seemed to be like a really like a pretty decent human being. Like, it seems like money was actually like did good with her. It seems like she became richer and she became prettier thanks to like all these alterations done by plastic surgeons. But instead of like turning into a major dick and like a stuck-up bitch, and pardon my French, she became like a pretty like decent, aware person. She is trying to sort of educate herself, but she's not a snob. She doesn't really care. At some point, she stops caring about fitting in with like the Hong Kong elite and the Singapore elite because she knows she'll never really be accepted. And she has to do so many things that make her so uncomfortable. And she's like, this is not me. And these people will probably never accept me for who I am, no matter like what face I put on. So Kitty Pong was amazing. Like, honestly, I loved her so much. She was fantastic. She was great. Also, the speech that Rachel gave Colette at the end of the novel was awesome. Like, it was really, really good. Like, I thought, like, Rachel gets, like, rave reviews and, like, clapping for me because she did awesome. So this is it for my review. I really tried to make it, like, 10 minutes long. Lol. You don't have to, like, if you stick till the end of this one, wow, like, you actually deserve a trophy and a medal, and I'm so sorry about that beep. That was my laundry. But anyhow, like I said, really good novel. If you liked Crazy Rich Asians, you'll like this one too. If you didn't like Crazy Rich Asians, don't bother, because you'll just like throw it out the window at some point out of frustration. So this is me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your patience, and I'll see you next time with another book review.